Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin the funeral service. We ask for those here present at the chapel to turn, if you have a cell phone or pager, if you could turn it off or put it to the silent mode. Officiating today is Rabbi Aaron Wolf.
I'll begin the 23rd Psalm. Mizmor David, Adonai Roi lo yachzor, B'nois deshe yabitzeni amei menuchos yina'aleni, Nafshi yeshoivev yancheni v'magla tzedek v'ma'an shmo, Gam ki elech begeit salmoves, lo ira ki ata imodi, Shiftecha mishantecha, heima yenachamoni, Ta'aroich lefonai shulchan neged tzoreroi, Dishanto v'shemen reishi koisi levaya, Ach toiv v'chesed yidafuni koyim echayai, B'shafti b'veis Adonai l'orech yamim. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. The rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou prepares the table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anoints my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today in person and also through Zoom, remotely, with friends and family, to mourn the passing of Joan Revsine. Yona Shoshana was her Hebrew name. And it's indeed a very sad day. Also happened too quickly. Well, sometimes that's good. Nobody wants suffering. Nobody wants, weeks, months or more, hospital admissions with who knows what. But on the other hand, it's too quick. No one expected it. Have you ever heard the expression, don't judge the book by the cover? I'm sure you had. Many times we meet people and sometimes we think we really know them, and we don't. Because it's very difficult at times to really know the neshama, the soul of the individual. We look on the outside. On the outside, she looks wonderful, she looks good. Sometimes on the contrary, they don't look like they're one of the best people. But deep inside is a Yiddish neshama. Deep inside is a real, true, good, emissaire soul that's very difficult at times to identify, even if we know them real well. I'll give you an example of this week's Torah portion. I always want to connect to the weekly Torah portion. This week's parasha is Achrei Mos. Really brief. We're talking about the passing of the two children of Aaron. Aaron HaKohen, the great Aaron, the brother of Moshe Rabbeinu, and his two children passed away. Why? First verse in the Torah portion. Why both children passed away at once? The Torah says, Bikarvasam lifnei Hashem vayamusu. They basically got too close. There were boundaries that they had to respect. That's what it appears like from the outside. And because they stepped over those boundaries, they were told, don't go past here. This is a no man's zone. This is, you can't go past over here. And if you do, you may not come out alive. And they did. So what does it look like? Oh, they did something wrong. But there's a different interpretation. Different interpretation that they became so engulfed in spirituality at the time. They became so close to God that the neshamas left this world. This is a physical world. And they became so tremendously involved in godliness at the time that their neshama could not tolerate being in this world. Why am I saying this? Because when you read simple translation, it's one verse in the Torah, it appears one way. Oh, they made a mistake. But the truth of the matter is, there is an interpretation that whatever you see from the outside may not be what really took place from the inside. You look at a person from the outside, they can look wonderful, they can look beautiful, they can look like the best. But deep inside, it may even be much more than what you can imagine. Much deeper, much better. I heard so many wonderful things about Joan, and I think whatever I'm going to share with you today, and whatever Mr. Revsine Bernie should live and be well for many, many more years to come. Whatever he shared with me, which I will be his mouthpiece today. And that's what he wanted me to do. But besides all this, it's much, much deeper. And you're talking about a very, very special neshama. So we know the world exists on three pillars. It's the first Mishnah in Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers. We have the world, just like a building has to have a foundation, the world has a foundation. There are three pillars that's holding up the world. The pillar of Torah, studying the Torah, the pillar of tefillah, of prayer, and the pillar of gemilas chasadim, of doing good deeds, doing all kinds of good deeds. The little that I heard in the last 24 hours, there's no doubt in my mind that we are today mourning the passing of Yonah Shoshana of Joan, who was a pillar of Torah, tefillah, and tzedakah. I was told that besides the fact that she was a teacher par excellence, she taught, teaching, learning was something what was part of her. Everybody has to eat in order to survive. Some people have to study in order to survive. This becomes part of their existence. She taught in Ari Crown, Hillel Torah, in public school, in Northbrook. She also taught in college, basically from grammar all the way up. And until very recently, she continued taking courses in college. She took courses at Northwestern, and I heard that very recent, she took a course with a topic, Jewish View on Heaven. A coincidence, right? Some coincidence? There's no coincidence. She wanted to know more about what is heaven all about. And as far as learning, she was always, always supportive. Children who wanted to go out and study, and she did everything she can to support that. Tzedakah, I was told she was a tremendous balas chesed. She did all kinds of things quietly. And Bernie didn't want me to be very specific because maybe somebody is listening and somebody will hear it and, it'll be embarrassing for that family, but she helped people in a very quiet way. People in her community, she figured out a way that others wouldn't even think of, how she can help. And that's called tzedakah. That's called charity. Charity doesn't always mean that I have to give you a coin. I have to give a poor man $1. Charity can also mean you help them. You care for them. You look out for them in circumstances where perhaps others wouldn't. But because she knew them and she knew what this family really needs, she went out of her way to help them. When she retired, she no longer taught. So what did she do in her free time? She had plenty what to do at home. Take care of the house. Using the words of Bernie, she was busy min boker ad orev. From the morning to the evening, she was busy doing everything besides caring for her husband, besides taking care of the house, but she also spent time teaching children for free. Children, I guess, who she felt that, she didn't need the money, I guess, and she knew that they needed this one-to-one tutoring, and she gave up of her time to help others and to help even children. So, again, this is another form of tzedakah. As I said before, tzedakah doesn't just mean a dollar bill. It means you give of your time. You give away from what you could have done. Who knows what anybody can do with their free time? But instead, you spend the time to help somebody else, to help another child. That's the highest level of tzedakah. And as far as tefillah, prayer, they were always involved in synagogue. They were members recently, for many years, of KJBS, which is synagogue in Peterson Park. Rabbi Liebtag is the rabbi there today. And it's interesting, I'll soon read for you what Bernie wrote, but he said one of the things that he was attracted when he first met Joan was the fact that she enjoyed going to shul. She enjoyed going to synagogue. This was attending services. Weekly shul attendance was something which was part of her. And that was one of the things that attracted them to each other. So tefillah was very important. The study of Torah, the tefillah, prayer, tzedakah, doing good deeds. These are the three pillars which the world exists according to the Talmud. And these are the three pillars that kept her going for 82 years until the soul went back to the Maker. So I think if this would be under different circumstances, Bernie would be up here and he wouldn't talk for 5 minutes and he wouldn't talk for 10 minutes, but he can probably go on and on and on. But so he asked me to read something that he prepared. I can never do it, never do it as good as he does, as he would, but I'll try. And if I don't do real good, please forgive me. So it was in the month of Kislev 1959, which is about December of 1959, right? And Bernard, he's talking a third person, and Bernard had just completed saying Kaddish for his mother, Aleh Shalom, when two of his friends, Cyril Rubin and Saul Gutstein, I don't know who they were trying to encourage him to attend a new couples club that they were forming for Jewish college graduates. The club was called the Forum of Jewish Ideas. Well, they had to try to encourage him. Finally, he agreed. One day, as he munched on a latke in a corner of the room, one of his friends said, "Look up," and the rest is history. He did. In a corner of the room, one of his friends said, "Look up," and he saw this beautiful young woman looking at him at a distance. He immediately lost interest in the latke and went to talk to her. Her name was Joan Burdick. And Bernard found their families had many things in common. As I said before, one of the things is that they attended synagogue services on a regular basis. They both came from strictly kosher homes. And that was part of him, that was part of her, and that was important when he had to choose who his wife will be. As their relationship blossomed further in the ensuing year, additional mutual interests were discussed: love of Jewish learning, again, learning, love of Israel, and interest in theater and arts. They found many things in common. And they got married January 8th, 1961. Recently, you can figure it out, 1961 to 2010. 2011 or 2021. They celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary. August 2021, on a Zoom call with family and friends. Something's wrong over here, but January. I'm sorry, January 2021. Sorry. So they had a Zoom call with family and friends from U.S. and all over the world, from Israel. They were all participating in their 60th wedding anniversary, 1961 to 2021. After they got married, going back to 1961, after Joan and Bernard got married, they had dinner at Siegel's Kosher Restaurant. Anybody remember that? 1961? I don't. Whose owner, Gene Siegel, was the founder of Crate and Barrel. That's where they had their dinner. After Shavuot Brachos, the 7 days of festivities that follows a wedding, they took a flight to Miami. They had their honeymoon over there, and they also continued their Shavuot Brachos over there. Joan began teaching public school while Bernard was working for his father's CPA firm. While Bernard was studying to finish off the CPA exam and learning at the yeshiva part-time. So for him, it was important to have both general studies, to have a profession, at the same time not to forget about the Torah studies as well. Joan recently reminded Bernard of an incident. So this, when I heard this, when I read it, just tells you again and again that when you do something meaningful, then it's not forgotten. I'm sure everyone over here can remember something 20, 30, or 40 more years ago because it really, really meant, it really was, it had a very deep meaning and it made an impression. And some of these memories last forever. So Joan reminded Bernie of an incident that happened when Kennedy was assassinated and the country was panicky. Bernard, he was concerned that Joan will leave school, she'll have to take public transportation, it may not be safe. So look at that. He went to pick her up so she should be safe going home. Maybe a simple little thing. Pick her up, okay. We do that usually when you have a bride and you have a fiancé. But this was so meaningful for her that she recently reminded him of that incident, and she said she'll never forget it. And I have no doubt that there are scores and scores of similar, relationship that they had between the two of them that she always remembered. But this was one thing that she reminded him from way back. They moved into their home in Peterson Park. They lived there since 1965. Initially, Joan and Bernard divided their shul time between what's called today Aguda and KJBS, but later on, they kept membership with KJBS. It was more comfortable for their children to be there, so that's what they chose. Joan and Bernard tried to teach their children how to remain loyal to Torah values in whatever they do. That should be a priority. This was illustrated in family trips, domestic and abroad, and many other things that they did together with their family. Jones studied Hebrew and Torah topics in the College of Jewish Studies at Northwestern University. As I mentioned before, studying was something which was very, very important to her. To summarize, and that's not my summary, that's Bernie's summary, that she was a true Eishes Chayil, a woman of valor. This is a term that's used by King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech. She was a true Eishes Chayil, and although Bernie was out of the house now for about 2 years, and we have with us here Mr. Stern, Eric Stern from Buckingham. They have done a tremendous, tremendous job taking care of Bernie for the past 2 years or so. Nevertheless, they spoke to each other. They communicated as much as they possibly can during this pandemic, of course. And they cared for each other. The love was there till the very, very end. Nothing changed. When there's true, true love, nothing can change that, no matter what the circumstances may be. So we hope and we pray that all the memories will be a blessing for members of the family, and we should all try to follow in Joan's footsteps, and we should share all of our memories with our families, with her children, grandchildren, and God willing, great-grandchildren, so that we should all know where we came from. It's very important for us to know who were our parents, who were our grandparents, and do whatever we can to follow in their footsteps. We will now hear from Paul remotely, and then Mitch will also. We're supposed to see it.
Hi, thank you very much, Rabbi. This is Paul Revsine. I'm Joan's oldest son. Thank you very much for your kind remarks. My mother really enjoyed people. She would have liked having so many people here to be able to, know how many people cared about her. As all of you know, my mother loved reading and she loved books, and she loved teaching people reading. Her license plate said, read to the number 2U. When my daughter was little, my mother took a picture of her wearing a bib that said born to read, and my mother had it published in a reading magazine. She loved to tutor, as the rabbi pointed out. She probably would have taught people for free because she liked working with children so much. And teaching them to read. She and my father were in book clubs, I remember years ago, and there tends not to be a lot of CPAs in book groups. They tend not to be the type who spend a lot of time reading and discussing novels, but my father really loved the culture that my mother brought to the marriage and really enjoyed these things very much. The same is true for the opera. They had a subscription to the Lyric Opera for some 40 years. One of the memories of my childhood was my mother listening to recordings of the operas that they were going to see before they went, and my father reading the librettos of the operas that they were going to be seeing. Also, over the years, my parents went to many plays. They subscribed to Court Theater and before that, the Steppenwolf Theater. When we were young, they used to take us to plays at the Goodman Theater downtown. And there was a children's theater, I remember, on Devon on the second floor that they used to take us to. When my kids were little, we would visit Chicago. My mother would also get tickets to plays. I specifically remember one semi-age appropriate play that we took the children to at Second City. For many years, we would go to New York to celebrate Mother's Day, and invariably, my mother would get tickets to a Broadway show so we could see that together. One of the things she was proudest of was her involvement with Hadassah. My mother was a lifetime member. Her mother was a lifetime member. She made both her daughters-in-law and granddaughters lifetime members of Hadassah. One time she joked to me that she felt that she had 4 children, Paul, Mitchell, Norman, and Siona. And we thought it was a little bit unfair that Siona never had to take out the garbage or clean her room. Occasionally, my mother and I would discuss the books that we were reading. I remember a few years ago, I recommended a book that I read by Madeleine Albright about fascism, and my mother read it and enjoyed that book. Just last week, I learned about a guy named Raphael Lemkin, who was the man who coined the term genocide and was the creator of the Genocide Convention. And in one of my last conversations with my mother, I mentioned that to him, and she hadn't heard of him either. And independently, my mother started watching some of my favorite political dramas The West Wing and Madam Secretary. So we were able to bond a little bit about that. She was, of course, a very involved and loving and devoted grandmother. She would spend a lot of time with my kids when we visited Chicago and when they came to work in when they came to visit us in Washington. And my kids would talk to her on a regular basis. And at some point, another time, my children will be talking about that as well. After a while, it took a while, but I finally got a call last week saying that I could get a COVID vaccination. I was very happy to get that. And I went over and got my shot, and I came back and I called my mother right away, and she was very happy to hear that. That was on Thursday, and this past Friday afternoon, she emailed me and she told me that she hoped I was feeling okay. And I thought that I would speak with her on Sunday and tell her that everything was fine. And of course, I never spoke with her again, but I certainly cherish the memory that my sort of last interaction with her was her concern, about my health and welfare. So that'll be a great memory for me. So now I'd like to ask my brother Mitch to share some of his memories of our mother as well.
Great, thanks, Paul. That was really kind words. One of my earliest memories that I've had about my mother is that when I was probably 5 or 6, it was just the two of us in the kitchen. It was mid-afternoon on a weekday, and she sneezed. And then she asked me, "What do you say?" Well, I had no idea what you say, but my best guess was, "Sneeze again?" She slapped me. My mother had a lot of great qualities, really a lot of great qualities that my brothers and I inherited, and we're very fortunate to have inherited them. Foremost would be on her side of the family, by and large, the people were very intellectual and cultured. And my brothers and I think of those attributes as core to who we are. As Paul said, my mother was always reading. She was someone who was always busy, always running around. But I have a lot of memories of her taking a break, sitting at the kitchen table, reading a book, or maybe a magazine or a newspaper, but she was always reading. I also have those same memories about my parents listening to the opera on the family stereo in the evenings in the week before the performances. But I also remember hearing other non-vocal classical music being played, folk music, and even popular music. And music was a big part of our childhood, and that all came through my mother. And my brothers and I were big fans of music, and that would be attributed to her. My mother also was a musician. When she was in high school, she played the flute in the marching bands. I also remember when I was younger, we would both sit at the piano, and she would play and I would sing along. And she also had a ukulele that she would take out and play periodically. My mother was also a big fan of art, and I have one vivid memory of her taking me when I was 7 years old to the Art Institute for an exhibit. And that's the first time I remember being at an art museum, and she really spawned my lifelong love of the arts. I've spent hundreds of hours in art museums, looking at modern arts, and in New York and around the world. And a lot of that comes from her, that interest. And when my parents would come to visit New York, we would take them to the various modern art museums to look together. And over the years, I've gone to so many exhibits, and I'd always call her afterwards and tell her what I saw, and we would discuss the artist or the exhibits, and that's something we shared in common. My mother was also a really good planner, an organizer, and a maker of lists. And I think some of that is genetic too. But here's just one example of her lists. It was for her shopping list. Most people have shopping lists, but the way she did it was one day she went into the supermarket with a pen and paper and went through each aisle and wrote down in each aisle what she could conceivably buy. And then when she got home, she typed it up on a piece of paper, and then she would print out multiple sheets of that list. And then throughout the week, when she was planning her shopping list, she would just circle the items she wanted, and that would expedite her trip through the supermarket. So as someone who uses a lot of lists, I'm thankful to her for that. My mother was also tough and persistent and direct. Those were some of her qualities. And she wanted her boys to be very independent. I remember when I was younger, we would ride our bikes sort of far away. I used to visit a friend in Skokie 3 miles away, and she didn't have a problem with that. We used to take the public transportation down to downtown or to Wrigley Field. And my mother really wanted us to be that way. She had so much confidence in us that she didn't even require us to take our cell phones with us. So we appreciated that. My mother, again, she had a tough exterior. And I think I inherited those qualities that really helped me in my life. I moved to New York after college, and some people consider that to be a tough place. I worked on Wall Street my entire career. And again, that can be tough, but I think I've survived in those environments principally because I had some of those qualities that my mother gave me. My mother was as I said, she was very persistent and persuasive. You always knew what she wanted. So I could think of times when my parents would come visit us in New York or New Jersey for a long weekend, and there would inevitably be a Friday night meal. And my mother didn't want it to leave it to chance what the menu would be. So she would send Anna an email, and it would be something like this. Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for hosting us. We don't mean to be any trouble. You can cook whatever you want Friday night, but here's a suggestion. Your father and I would like 3 pieces of chicken cooked at 425 for 4 hours. Parenthetically, she liked to cook meat for a long time. And then we also want a piece of noodle kugel. It can't be fewer than 6 ounces and no more than 12 ounces because we don't want leftovers. And we need 2 challahs, a big one and a small one. And the weight ratio of the larger to the small has to be between 2 to 3 times. Oh, but you can do whatever you want for dessert, but it would be nice if you had something chocolate and some fruit, preferably berries. But I don't want to be too much trouble. Here's some suggestions. Lastly, my mother definitely was someone who was a huge advocate of the family being together, and there's many examples of that. I'll just mention a few. She was so welcoming to her 2 daughters-in-law from the very beginning. And I know there's the stereotype of the Jewish mother for whom no woman is good enough for her sons. But fortunately for all of us involved, Paul and I were not those type of people. The bar was very low, and our spouses were excellent. So it actually flipped the equation. But nevertheless, my mother was always welcoming to them and always warm to them. And they're both appreciative of that. Also, as Paul said, my mother loved her 4 grandchildren. But I would say with a proviso that it had to be after 9 a.m. after she had her morning coffee. But she did love her grandchildren. She loved to spend time with them. And I think in her later years, maybe since she was a grandmother, I would say her most favorite activity was trying to get the entire family together for a vacation so we could all spend time together. And I can think of at least 6 occasions on which she got us together in various locations for some amazing vacations that she paid for, where we were all together. And I think she was really at her happiest period then when she saw all her kids and her grandkids. In closing, I would say that my mother's passing was very sad and a shock to all of us. But I think what will get us through in time is that we have a lot of great memories of our mother. She was a great person. She brought us up well. She gave us a lot of great traits and taught us a lot of things that are valuable for life. And I think a lot of her is in us, in her sons. And so in that respect, she'll always be with us. Thank you.
Okay, we will conclude with a Moler Rachamim and then with a Kaddish, because we're going to have a minyan over here for Kaddish. Not sure if we'll have a minyan in the cemetery, so the Kaddish will be recited after the service. Okay, those that are able to, please rise for the Kil Moler Rachamim. El Moler Rachamim Sheichem Amroimim Amtzei Menuch Nechoin Al Kanfei Yashchino B'Malois HaKadoshim B'Torem Kezer Rekia Mazhirim Es Nishmas Yonah Sheshana Bas Ab Yesu Shalchol V'Yoy Lomo Bavu Shenot V'Tzedakah B'Adas Kodas Nishmas B'Gan Eden Tei Menuchoso Lochem Balarach Miyastirecha B'Seisek Nafov V'Yoylamim V'Yitzer Oir B'Yitzrei Rachayim Es Nishmos Adinoi Hu Nachaloso B'Sonuach HaMishkava B'Shalom V'Neimar Amen. O God, full of compassion, Thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of Thy presence. among the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament unto the soul of Joan Revsine, known as Yona Shoshana Bas Rabbi Yosef, who has gone unto eternity. Lord of mercy, bring her under the cover of their wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. May God be possession, may her repose be in peace. Let us all say, Amen. 1 minute. We're going to say the longer Kaddish. So you can say along with me. We'll go slow. The longer Kaddish. Where's Mizrach? East of this one. Yiskadal v'yiskadash mei rabo v'yomod hu osid lischadeto ulachyo mesayo uleshachvelo heichlei ulemifrak chaya ulemivnei karto d'Yerushalayim ulemekar pulchana nuchra'a me'arei v'la'asava pulchana kadisha tishmaya le'asrei וזיווי ויקורי ושכנתי ויעצמח פוקני וקורי משיחי וחיי חוין וביומי חוין וחיי דכל בייס ישראל תסכלי חרבו וחפנו מויסנו מנונו מכל עמו בייס ישראל בעגלו ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן יהי שמי רבו מבורך לעולם עולמי עולמיה Yisparach v'yishtabach v'yispar v'yisremam v'yisnasei v'yishador v'yisale v'yishalo shmei d'kutsha b'richu v'eila min kol b'chasa v'shirasa tush b'chasa v'nechamasa d'amira mi'ama v'imru amen Yehei shlomo rabba min shmaya v'chayim toivim aleinu V'akol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imramav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'akol Yisrael v'imru amen.
This concludes the funeral here at the chapel. The interment will be at West Lawn Cemetery. For those here, if anyone is joining us at the cemetery, we'll be lining up right in front of the chapel. We'll be placing a magnetic flag on your vehicle. And we also have your headlights and hazard lights on while in procession, and drive as close as safety permits to the vehicle in front of you. For those that are online, watching on the Zoom, we're going to turn the Zoom off and then turn it back on in approximately 45 minutes. It's the same link, and you'll be able to link in with the same link. Let's go out first.